good afternoon, good evening, wherever we happen to find you today. Um, Thanks for showing up for our 2024 Stroud Leadership Summit. It's interesting that we should have it on May the 4th. So may the 4th be with you all. Thank you. We're thrilled to have you aboard. Today's theme, or this year's theme for the Stroud Leadership Summit, is AI for Unity, Bridging Divides in a Polarized World. As many of you know, things are becoming increasingly disunified and polarized. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, particularly with the acceleration of technology that is likely to stoke the fires even more, the flames even more, was to spend a little time talking about generally AI, what we're seeing around the world. We're going to have Dave talk with us about China and US versus US AI initiatives and things that are going on. We'll have Dennis speak to us around cybersecurity. I'm going to take Umer's lead in some of the question and answer panels since we've done a recording for him and talk about kind of general findings, what's happening in corporate America with regards to AI, because we're working on a number of projects together. And then we're going to go to some discussion with our creative team. For those of us who have made it, looks like we got another person from way overseas, half a world away. Thanks, Paul, for joining us. So look forward to introducing Paul to all of you. He's got a great team. We call them the trio from down under. They're over in Australia. So we got a really great lineup here for you all. Before we get started, what I'd like to do is take a moment to introduce myself and two people that really impacted our lives that we've recently lost. So my name is Frank Shines. I'm the founder of Stroud Leadership Academy, and obviously the facilitator and the organizer for this year's event. In addition to that, I'm closely involved as a spokesperson for Colorado College, the Stroud Scholars, Sachs Foundation, and so forth. So unfortunately, over the last couple of months, we lost two really important people. My mother's brothers, Lemuel Paul Stroud, passed away about a month and a half ago. And unfortunately, then we lost my Uncle Joe, who really was a great mentor to me. Had it not been for him, I wouldn't be in this position having this conversation with all of you today. So just wanted to take a moment and recognize both of them. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So here's our agenda for today. I'll take a moment to do a little welcome and intros. We'll go around on behalf of Reina and Sibil and Umer, who may or may not make it. I don't think they will make it, but we'll see and keep checking here, because some of them said, or one or two of them said, if they can possibly change anything, they'll try to do it. One's in the Middle East, another's in Amsterdam, and the other individual is traveling out of New York into India. So that's why we had the conflict. Then we'll turn it over to Dave, as we spoke about earlier, and General Stilwell is going to walk us through some really interesting and timely topics regarding AI and U.S. versus China. We'll have João, Paul. If Stuart arrives, do let me know. I apologize. I'm looking through the other screens and so forth. If anyone from the other members of the crew, such as Ralph and Mike or Kai, show up, we'll give them a chance to make some remarks as well. And then we're going to get right back into it with Dennis. Dennis is going to present some information regarding cybersecurity in the age of AI. And then a panel discussion is going to be kind of a free-for-all. So, in fact, if you all have questions, feel free to put information in the chat. We'll be happy to respond to that. We did get some, I guess, about a half a dozen questions from college prep students that we've included in this presentation. So we'll pose some of those questions to the panel as well. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead, and I will pause here for a moment just in case. Is anyone having any problems technically hearing us? Please feel free to unmute if you need to, or if I need to unmute you, let me know. And also feel free to send us a chat if you're having any concerns, any issues. And seeing that I don't see any immediately, and please truly let me know if you notice anything hop up that I miss as we go through the session, if you don't mind. So with that said, we'll move over to the next slide. So Dave Still was going to speak to us first. He and I went to the academy together, as well as with Dennis. He's one of the leading authorities on AI in China, worked under the State Department. He's since been involved with an organization called IFC, and I'm going to let him tell you more about that because it's just really a fascinating amount of work that they're doing on the cutting edge of technology and the future of war. Reina Flor is a four-time Olympic athlete. She competed lastly in the Rio Olympics, where me and my wife and my daughter were down there for that particular Olympic event. Umar Qureshi is a leading technology and AI expert. Sibil Sebastian Patchi is the individual that we mentioned out of New York. Just an amazing story. You guys are going to be looking forward to hearing her video that we recorded. I don't want to steal her thunder. If she happens to jump on here and tells a little bit about it as well, that's great. But grew through the corporate ranks, was involved in some of the most important mergers and acquisition types of activity in the finance industry, and has since become an important social activist and an entrepreneur with her own business. And then we'll turn it over to Dennis from Coefficient. We'll talk about cybersecurity as we mentioned before. I know we have some folks that are calling in from all around the world. And so what I would like to do, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, Paul, but if any of you want to, and we'll start with you, Paul, and then go to you, João, want to go ahead and make any comments. I know that you guys are in some, are different time zones, so you may have scheduling conflicts, so we want to recognize that. So, Paul, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll set it up by saying the work that we've been doing with Paul over the last several years has been just one of the most memorable, will be the most memorable experience of my life. They've come in, they've been friends and family. They're like family for the Stroud family. When they saw the activities and things we were doing with the Stroud Scholars, understood the story around Dolphus Stroud in the 1928 Olympics, in which he was not allowed to travel, so he ran and walked and jogged 2,000 miles from Colorado to Cambridge to compete in the 1928 Olympic trials at Harvard Stadium. They just took on a unique role in terms of what they've done musically on behalf of the documentary, the other music that's going to accompany the opera. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and go ahead and making whatever remarks you'd like.
Oh, hi Frank, and thanks for the intro. Just to let you know, Stuart, he's in Greece at the moment, so he's taking a break. So he wasn't able to make it, and Marcel's in bed asleep. It's 2:00 here, so she's just come back from a gig, so from a show she was doing. So apologies to those people. I guess we're quite intrigued by the AI area as well. So I've got to say I'm quite interested in that, especially in a creative field. What AI can do in a creative element. It's all quite interesting. I actually been following quite a bit of the technology myself, so I'm very interested to hear more on that. But yeah, I'm very excited to kind of also work with everybody in terms of what we're doing around working along the documentary. It's been a real fantastic journey for us to learn about the Strouds and that sort of heritage and the background, and kind of place ourselves in the position of as best we could to understand. And it's been a really important part of my life is to learn about him and the Stroud family, I think, and what it means to the people. And I suppose when Frank, you were talking about the way the world's going at the moment, it's
right.
Watching the students at the moment, what they're doing, and if you marry that in with the AI of what some other people are doing with AI, and it's just been it's a strange mix, but it's you can see that how important that is to so many people. These matters. The world's changing, and I think these things all matter.
Oh,
and
yeah,
if
for
I
sure.
went back,
Hey, Paul, are you guys
sorry,
having protests there in Australia as well?
we certainly are. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think it's been very interesting watching our government toy with the whole um, the whole thing. It's been, just from a purely observational point of view, they've kind of swung their perspective and changed their perspective, and that's been really interesting to watch them going from what I'd say the media and we can lay claim to some of that because Rupert Murdoch's an Australian, or was. He started out here, but I suppose watching them go through the change, and I think the World Kitchen event really set them thinking differently. So, but yeah, whichever side whoever's on, it doesn't. It's I just think the world's changing and people's attitudes are changing and beliefs are changing and activism is changing. And somebody was saying the students are really interesting because they're looking at it from a the Vietnam War, there was, you could be conscripted, but these students are looking at, I think that they're doing it out of, there's a purity about it, I think, is what somebody was saying. And I thought, yeah, there's probably a really good point to that, so,
Yes.
yeah.
Excellent.
So,
well, Paul, by the way, you teed this up, right? I mean, I'm looking at Joe over in Seattle, and I know Dave's probably just, I know where you guys might be coming from. This is going to be just a great conversation. Any other comments, Paul, before we turn it over to Joao?
No, sorry, I went on a tangent there. It's been
no, not at all. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about. This is
okay.
Gotta have this part of what we're hoping to do is unify by having some of those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Sadia, thanks for joining us as well. And so what I'll go ahead and do is, are there any other crew members that have joined us from? Let me just make sure that we're okay. There we go. Any other crew members? Ralph, Mike, Kai? Okay, Joao, I'll turn it over to you. And by the way, those of you, you're more than welcome to go off video if you like, as we go through different parts of the presentation, mute and then unmute. And given the group of people we have here, I think the panelists is going to include everyone. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you. Joao.
So my name is João Rocha. I'm a Brazilian-born conductor and composer. And it's a pleasure, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I think it's very interesting because I've met Frank a couple of years ago during the pandemic. There was some sort of partnership between Frank and an opera company in New York. And they were looking for a composer that could basically understand the Stroud family values and translate that into music. And of course, that was the situation when I got in contact with this fantastic story about a man that just walked and jogged 2,000 miles to reach his goals. Of course, that was the first thing that amazed me and got me involved with the project. But the funny part of this story is that after we got in contact, the partnership with this opera company was not developed anymore. And then I got in contact with Frank from my personal side. I looked for some information, for some mentorship, and that was when I got in contact with the Stroud family's history. All their influences, all their background. And it's very interesting for me because from that moment on, I was not more a musician that was hired to do a gig, to do a job, to compose an opera. And I was someone that was learning a lot. I am still someone learning a lot during this process and seeing how it's interesting, how it's possible for you to take this background and those events from the past and link to the 21st century. That's going to reach up this summit here in 2024. For me, that's especially interesting and important because as a Brazilian-born artist, I can still feel this kind of, the lack of this kind of attitude and posture here in Brazil. The Black population here in Brazil still suffers a lot. We are still marginalized. And so for me to be involved with this kind of project became something quite visceral and very important to me. The second part of this whole process was to get in contact with Frank from this entrepreneurial side of things, and to understand more about this AI world that I was not specifically aware of all the potential that these tools and all this technology has. And it's been a very interesting and also important process to me to understand the power of that. And again, I bring the spotlight to my side when I say that it's interesting because this development of this kind of tool, tools, it's important. How could we uh, give more access to people, for example, from my side, to the music world? I don't know, 150 years ago, just people with some specific background, from specific ethnic groups, with a specific access to the information, were able to have contact with this art form, that's the symphonic music or opera or something like that. And nowadays, with the AI, we could like make a more democratic process for us to give people access to classical music. And that's the thing that's very, very important and to me. And just to finish, the other thing that's very, very nice during this whole thing that I think that brings us together here today is that in this process of the opera that we are doing, for example, I've composed music over a theme called Anthem of Heaven. That's also that was composed by someone from the Stroud family that I don't remember the name. Frank, could you help me, please?
Yeah, Katie Stroud. So he was born on a Texas slave plantation. Some of his older siblings were born before 1865. Remember Juneteenth and all of that. So it was delayed by 2 years in Texas where they were at. And so they stayed on that plantation until he was 19 years old, and then he moved away. But he wrote this song, this idea of Anthem of Heaven, part of the struggle of his family and things that he saw. And he woke up one day and had this melody in his head. And then I passed this melody on to you. There's the baton, and it was all yours. And then what? What did you do with it? It was powerful.
Yeah, and it was crazy because like Frank and I, we were talking probably for 3 weeks, and I said, okay, explain to me, what do you want? What can you see with this melody? What are you thinking about? And after trying a couple things and etc. And by the way, congratulations to my colleagues from Australia. You guys did a great job,
Yes.
and I've heard what they've done as well. And it was very nice. And this is what I was going to say. And when I got in contact with the work that my colleagues from Australia already developed, I said, okay, I think that now I understand, because the idea of this opera is very powerful, because we're not talking about traditional classical music, just about the Central European language. To be more specific, the German symphonic language, because it's quite predominant until nowadays. We are talking about including influences of R&B and hip hop and rock and even rhythms from Brazil. And then I'm going to get to my last paragraph, I swear. That when I got this contact with this music from my colleagues from Australia, as I said, okay, I think that now I understand everything I had to do. And then I remember everything that Frank said, that we are not talking just about the story of a person of color, people of color history, a family just composed by people of color. There are people from different backgrounds and Native American as well. And that has a lot to do with people here in Brazil. My family is composed this way. And then when I got to this melody, I said, okay, I know what I'm going to do. And then I started to play with the percussion related to the Native American people. And then I used some different scales, not different, not everything, not specifically esoteric or exotic, but I used the scales related to the Native American people, mainly from North America. And then by the end of the composition, the climax is to get to the Anthem of Heaven. And I did that with the best capabilities that I had at time. And I was really thrilled when I saw that people from Frank's family and Frank himself got they were in tears when they listened to the song.
It was like the
and,
work
and
that
then for me, it was really an emotional moment as well. So basically, this is me. Basically, this is my story. Just to finish, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I hope we can see each other more. Count on me if you need anything. And I'm really glad to be in this summit as well to learn from you.
Thank you very much, Juan. And what we'll
My
do
pleasure.
is I did notice that ASAP is on. So ASAP, we're going to go to Dave here in a moment. And after his presentation, if you're okay, if you feel comfortable making any remarks, please feel free to do so. Okay, Trudy, thanks for making that note about some people weren't able to be seen on the video. Hopefully it's working better now. I can see it on my screen, but we'll go to our next steps in the program. So first of all, just as way of background, as I had mentioned earlier, I'm Frank Shines. I am the son of Vanessa Stroud, who was born in Colorado Springs. And as we touched on a moment ago with the conversation around Anthem of Heaven by João, K.D. Stroud, these are all of his children and grandchildren. And this is in 1938 on the event of his passing away, his death. So everyone from all were up there. Some people were in Mexico. Some people were in all over the country, New York, you name it, right? And they got on trains and they all came back. And this is their mother, the matriarch, my great-grandmother, Lulu, who is from the Creek Nation. And so our family, we're made of Native American, Creek Nation, Tawakoni, Ghana, Nigeria from my father's side, and British Irish, and even Scandinavian, because when you see Lulu's mom at some stage, you'll see the Scandinavian features that she had as part of a mixed race Creek Nation and Scandinavian. So, I mean, it's just one example of just, more than 100 years ago, just how diverse we were even then, right? And moving forward to current day, this is my grandfather, Tandy Stroud, and KD is the runner that we talked about. He's partially outside of the picture on your far left. And then the next picture on the top right, we were planning on having this event at the Sable Mesa property there in Colorado Springs, but because of some changes that took place with regards to senior prom for the students, they thought it was only 20%, to only find out later it was closer to 50%. So we're going to do the event. Normally we do that event at this large location here. You can see in the lower left, we have the annual Independence Day. For those of you who have not yet made plans for Independence Day, we welcome you. Look forward to seeing you if you can make it. I'm there in the middle, and the two amazing women who are responsible for running and organizing the property is my cousin Nicole on the left here circled, and on the right, Ashley. So we thank them, and we apologize that we weren't able to use their beautiful facilities for this leadership summit, but we look forward to the Independence Day event, which will be held July 6th, and for upcoming events around the Stroud Leadership Academy, as well as the summit. Okay. We're here to also honor college prep grads, many of them first generation going to college. And to give you a little bit of background, the Stroud Scholars was part of the program that took place when F.E. Stroud and Dolphus Stroud became the first Black to attend Colorado College and graduate. Henry Sachs, any of you who shave, whether your legs or your face, and use the Gillette razor, this is the individual, Henry Sachs, that invested in the Gillette company. So every time you guys shave or invest in a razor of any sort that's Gillette related, that money has an impact directly on the Sachs Foundation, which has graduated thousands of students, many first-time generation out of college, into college, pardon me. And obviously you can see the mix of individuals, women, and other minority groups as well. Minds Matter out of Colorado Springs, the Peak Education, and the UCCS, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, their pre-collegiate development program, and then finally Pikes Peak. Those are the individuals that we're paying tribute to today as part of this event. So congratulations to all of our college preppies. A little bit of background. We'll leave these slides so you guys can look at these at your leisure. You'll see the history of the Sachs Foundation and the Colorado College. The Sachs Foundation was also one of those items that was created in partnership with the Stroud family back in the 1920s. And it's been around for almost 100 years now, 96, 97 years. Thank you to all the supporters and sponsors, Sable Mesa Resort, Bacobo Kids, which is the organization founded by Reina Flor, our four-time Olympic athlete, who is one of our key speakers. Coefficient Technologies out of the Washington, D.C. area. Dennis will speak. In Pursuit, Sibil, she's one of our speakers that we recorded, and we'll have her information available for all of you. International Brazilian Opera Company, very close friends of the family and partners that we've worked with in the past and will continue to partner with as we move forward with the Brazilian opera. And of course, Athena, Christine, Joao McDowell. Thank you all for all your support over the years. And of course, we're going to be looking to Joao Rocha as we move forward with the next phases of the opera, but then circling it back around with IBOC for certain aspects of the opera development as well. The Stroud Family Colorado, the RTL Foundation, they support us in terms of nonprofit and how our transactions and so forth move through. And then an organization that our family owns, the Analytics AIML, which is responsible for AI machine learning types of activities. You'll hear more about that in the future. With that said, we'll turn it over to Dave Stillwell. He comes to us from the United States Air Force Academy Institute for Future Conflict, retired Brigadier General. He's one of the leading, nation's leading experts and authorities on the United States and China, particularly as it relates to artificial intelligence. And he continues to work on the cutting edge of the future of conflict with the director of the Institute, B.J. Swaidel, who is a Lieutenant General there at the Air Force Academy, also a good friend and Air Force Academy grad. I apologize for having that little typo there on director. Dave, if you've been promoted, welcome. So I will turn it over to you.
Hey, you flatter me. I'll take it. Hey, Dennis, it's good to see you again. Frank, Dennis, BJ, and I all went to different schools together. So we'd see each other on the Terrazzo, from time to time. But again, Dennis holds the honor of being the 20,000th graduate of the Air Force Academy. So good for you. Let me share my screen here. I am nothing without slides. Let's get to it here. Okay, so I want to talk about the threat today, what it is that we are working against. I really admire, Frank, the fact that this is an educational organization and an opportunity, because the key to all this is simply education. It's getting serious about how we do education in the U.S., and it's about what I hope to do today is educating all of you on how the PRC looks at this conflict or competition, however you want to look at it. And here's the point. Bottom line up front, we think, when you say warfare, we think bombs and bullets. When the PRC, and I say PRC, I don't say China. The Chinese people get no vote in this. There's 1.4 billion people who have no say in what their government does. So please be very careful in your terms. Chinese government, Chinese Communist Party, People's Republic of China. That's the problem. The Chinese people are like the rest of us. They would love to have democracy. But the PRC has a winning strategy called political warfare. And I'll show you how that works. And it's TikTok and it's Ernie and other things. So if you haven't heard of Ernie, I'll introduce you to it here in a second. I read Chinese, both their public and their, what they say to themselves every day. And about a year ago, you could see them getting very excited about ChatGPT. And the reason is that decision-making in an authoritarian system is very risky. If you make a bad decision, you're subject to immediate removal because there's no election process to get you out of there. So they saw ChatGPT as a great substitute for the Sturm und Drang of having these decision-making bodies and processes. And you could hear them like, hey, this is great. This is going to solve all our problems. It really is. It's magnificent technology. And then it went silent. And I don't know this is a fact, but I'm pretty sure what happened is they downloaded their own version of ChatGPT, set it up in their offices of the Chinese Communist Party headquarters, had some poor schmuck down at the keyboard, and they go, what's the hardest question we can ask this? And they go, I don't know. How do we solve the Taiwan problem? And he types it in there, and the answer, guess what? You have to democratize. And they said, all right, shut it down. That's enough of that. So that is all speculation, that central coda there. But the backside is what then we heard nothing but about. We didn't hear about ChatGPT anymore. We heard about Ernie Bot, produced by their own company, Baidu. Ernie Bot takes that huge data lake that ChatGPT uses, and anything dealing with democracy, it eliminates. Anything to do with freedom of speech, those other things that we like are gone. So it's now it's a massive echo chamber. If you want, there's a Nikkei. That's what this headline is. Nikkei did a really good job of putting the two side by side. So that's an advantage for us. We have to take advantage of that. And Frank, what you guys are doing, and Dennis and others, I think this is a great opportunity. 3 points is, time in the military. Trying to make everybody understand that when the PRC says warfare, they're talking about all types of warfare, primarily information. You talked about the frictions in our own societies. That in large part is due to their unlimited access to our Twitter space, New York Times, any other media space. They have full access, and they do things to drive us into the polls, to drive us apart. If we end up fighting each other and become exhausted fighting each other, then they just walk in, plant the flag, and take over. And that has been the strategy in Chinese history over time. It's called political warfare, and we need to be aware of it. So thank you for paying attention. I can send you references to that idea. They have vulnerabilities, and I'll point some of those out. And this is where what you're doing can really help. Now, how do we defend against that? You cannot have a government organization telling you what's false and what's true. We tried that with the Disinformation Governance Board. It's 1984. Whatever happens, it works out to 1984, and we can't stoop to their level. We have to maintain and stay true to ourselves. So what it comes down to is education and critical thinking education in our schools. And again, I hope all of you take that message back to your school boards and say, the cell phone, the smartphone is a really wonderful tool, but it comes with some very dark and sharp edges. We should work on that. And then I'll talk a little bit about the life here in the Institute of Future Conflict and dealing with cadets. They're awesome. Okay, point one, Clausewitz, a military theoretician in the 1800s who said that war is an extension of politics. Well, that was actually revolutionary at the time. War used to be seen as its own thing. But the mental picture that creates, as you see on the left graph there, takes us down the wrong path. When I say war, I'm sure every one of you thinks of bombs, bullets, boats, shooting and killing. And that's not how the PRC looks at it. They look at warfare in every domain, not just in the military domain. So when they say war, we should specify armed conflict. Now we're talking about armed conflict, then the left graph applies. However, if we're dealing with the PRC, the right graph applies. They are in our seams. They are driving wedges in our own countries. They are in our economic systems. They're also in our tech. Now, ChatGPT is just one of them, but as you know, and all of you know well, is they're finding the best tech that we develop, and they're taking it for their own uses. It's not that the Chinese people cannot be creative. They're the most creative people on the planet. It's very dangerous in an authoritarian system to think too big of thoughts. You start thinking too far out of the box. You start asking questions like, well, why can't we have democracy? And that gets you in big trouble. So here's our main weakness, and it's our main strength too, but the PRC sees this as a weakness, is that liberal democracy and market economies are basically subject to whoever wants. And if you're a Chinese PLA officer, military officer, you can buy land right outside of our air bases. And we have those. They have listening devices pointing at U.S. military bases in North Dakota, Texas, and other places. So again, we have to stay true to ourselves, but we probably can do a little more research to figure out who these people are, why they're buying this stuff in our country, and then take steps through the Congress and through the law to legally prevent that. Our openness makes us stronger, and again, the electoral process, we're in an electoral year this year, fraught with risk. The PR sees that, but it always works out. That's the beautiful thing about democracy. When it looks like it's right about to tip over, people get serious about their vote, and good things happen. And the free market and the free information space that we have maximizes efficiency. If you've read The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, really it talks a lot about how this whole idea of technology, exploded because people were willing to share with each other. And it's a very efficient system, but as I've been saying, it's open to manipulation. So let's stay true to ourselves and just be patient. It will eventually work out. And I'll give you examples of how it's already working currently. But this always bothered me. You've got these inserts in the New York Times. If you look on that right photo up at the top, that little moniker China Watch doesn't look particularly nefarious. Above that, it says paid advertisement. People skip that. They're too busy to read that. And then they read all this wonderful stuff about Xi Jinping and what he's doing in China and the world, with none of it's true, and they're not bound by the truth. They're not even subject to any sort of review. They just put that stuff out there, and we, in our busy lives, are too busy and had not enough time to actually read deeply into it, think critically about what you saw, and then go, wait a sec, that doesn't make any sense. So they have China Watch, they have China Radio International, they have China Central Television, China Global Television Network. All of those are very readily available in our country. And then they use money as well to get our own people to do the wrong thing. And again, awareness takes us, that's 90% solution, just being aware of it. Once you do that, you can defeat it. That was our weakness. Here's their weakness. There's no feedback loop. The emperor has no clothes. No one dares tell Xi Jinping that and it's pronounced like the female pronoun she, right? Not Xi or he or however people X. That's not a Xerox X, that's a SH X. Xi Jinping. He has taken on himself both the, basically all the accolades that come with his magnificent leadership that apparently is never going to end. Prior to 2022, all previous PRC authoritarians would gracefully and peacefully leave office after 10 years. He decided to extend his stay, and therefore he's in big trouble, and he knows it, because people have, the knives are out, and so he's really getting defensive. That's an advantage for us. We should be using that. He can't be seen as making mistakes, so he uses propaganda to paper over those mistakes, like COVID-19 or the zero COVID process. They like to use math to make decisions, because if the math is wrong, you can't be blamed yourself. But as we're talking about, ChatGPT or now Ernie Bot are even better choices, because besides math, you can just ask it a question and then take the answer. But the point is, if the answer that comes out of the algorithm or the math is wrong, don't blame me. It was people who wrote it. Put them in prison. Drive on. If you remember zero COVID, they had this policy where they shut the entire economy down for 3 years, and then in December of 22, there was a mass riot. Zero COVID wasn't working, and they eventually had to change their policy. And instead of easing into something that looks like what the rest of us are doing, right, self-isolation and all that, they just threw the doors open, and about 1 million people died. Did you hear about that? Did anybody hear about that? And the answer is why not? Or the question is why not? How come you didn't hear about this? I mean, I know it because I can read the Chinese, but American media and that don't find that interesting. We have problems with our own media. When we mention Murdoch and others who see media as entertainment, and it's no longer there to educate the electorate. Remember, democracy requires an informed electorate, and the fourth estate, the media, was responsible for that. And that is no longer the case. So the question is, where do you find good information? I'll talk about that here in a second. But there's no incentives in the PRC to tell us anything is wrong. So when this thing comes apart, it's going to explode. It's going to blow up. You're not going to see this graceful degradation. Eventually, it's going to just explode in their face. All right, two things. One, people who have not lived outside the United States, these protesters at Columbia and UCLA and others, I wish they would see how the rest of the world operates, and they would get a good idea of just how good things are in the U.S. It's not all that bad. Yes, we have our flaws, but we can deal with those flaws. Our system of government allows people through the electoral process and other things, through the legislature, to have their voice heard and to address issues, so we become a more perfect union as we go forward. In our system, and again, people have never lived outside the U.S., definitely, if you have lived in China, you get this. And, from the Declaration of Independence, to secure these, governments are instituted by the people, and they govern at the consent of the people. In short, the laws that Congress writes, the Constitution, and those things, protect us, the people, from a rapacious government. And you're going, duh, that's how it always, that's how it works, right? No. This is how it works in the PRC. The laws in China protect the government from 1.4 billion people who want just to have a voice in how things are run. They want the freedom to do what they want to do, but they can't have that happen because the CCP, the Communist Party, would be booted out of office. Rule by law rather than rule of law. So in that system, and this is a traditional Chinese way of governance, the government is there by divine right through what they call Tianming, the mandate of heaven. And they are allowed to govern until they start failing, at which point the people rise up and remove them. That's why the PRC is a police state. That's why they spend more money on domestic security than they spend on fighting us. And that's a vulnerability. If we could get information into that system, we could let the Chinese people know that you're being lied to, and you shouldn't put up with this. Briefly on Chinese history, what you see as a Chinese map today is not traditionally Chinese territory. Most of it's been annexed. In the west, Tibet, Xinjiang, which is better known as East Turkestan, over the long term, that's East Turkestan. They've only named it Xinjiang, which means, by the way, new frontier. And they say it's always been part of the Chinese, map. And you're going, well, then why do you call it the New Frontier? Because you bolted it on in 1950. But the thing I like most about this picture is in the upper right corner, you've got that red block. All of northeast China used to be Chinese, and then the Russians took it back in 1860. And Vladivostok is a very important port for them that gives them access to Sea of Japan, and the Russians have it. Don't ever for a minute believe that Russia and China are friends. They are bitter enemies. There is a marriage of convenience right now based on who we are in the U.S., but for the most part, it wouldn't take much on our part in terms of information warfare to get them to start staring at each other. And so we should start thinking about how we do that. There's that red block way up in the northeast. That's opportunity. Northern Vietnam and North Korea have never been friends of the PRC, by the way, or China, because China keeps invading them as they did in 1979. These are the current conflicts. This is China's peaceful rise. Well, this is what it looks like, right? They're fighting India on its shared border with Tibet in two places, in Bhutan and up in the Doklam Plateau. Currently fighting in Burma. Open disputes with Vietnam, Philippines. If you come around north of Taiwan there, you've got between Japan and Taiwan, the Senkaku Islands, and other places. So this idea of everybody loves the PRC and all that stuff in the region. Again, we just have to look at the facts, take some time, do some analysis, and some critical thinking, and then we can defeat those negative narratives. Meantime, you've got an island of 25,000 people of Taiwan that doesn't want to be any part of this, right? And they have elections, and it's a vibrant democracy. And again, as long as Taiwan exists, and as long as American democracy exists, it's a threat to the Chinese Communist Party, because they are an authoritarian system based on communism, as the Russians were, and it's going to fail just like the Soviet system did in 1991. The question is, how much damage are they going to do in the process? But again, we need to support Taiwan. We committed to Taiwan. President Biden has committed 4 times to coming to their aid, which is magnificent. To just state that very clearly, that's a deterrent for any perceived bad actions. So, how do we resist information warfare? We could have the government try to do it, but anytime that happens, it's going to be Winston Smith. If you haven't read 1984, this is a good time to read it. The protagonist in 1984 is a guy named Winston Smith. His job is to cut out names of people who are no longer in favor, X-person, whoever this guy was. Cut out photos in newspapers and remove them because these people are no longer in favor. And this is an electronic version of that. On the right side, I show you an exchange between me and a friend. We're still in touch. We disagree on almost everything, but we're trying our best to maintain the relationship because we like each other. We're friends, but we disagree on politics. She has a problem with the fact that I was in the Trump administration. Look, if everybody takes that attitude and walks away from a particular administration that they didn't vote for, you're going to hobble the country. We should all do our best to support the rightfully elected leaders, no matter who they are, right? But look at the headline on this one. The headline on the New York Times, and this is what people do, we're in such a hurry, is we swipe left on our phone. We just read the headline. We don't read the story, and the headline writers have an agenda. And this agenda says, Trump's boldest argument, the president has a license to kill. Of course, she says, wow, what's going on in this country? Well, if you look at the real exchange that happened during his trial, it was the judge who mooted that point. There was a judge who put that up as a hypothetical and says, if he ordered SEAL Team 6 and whatever, but the New York Times picked that up, flipped it, and put those words in former President Trump's mouth. I showed that to my friend, and she comes back with, yep, clickbait is ridiculous. Yes, it is, and we should all take that point, and we should demand more. And rather than participating in this and clicking on these things, we should then tell New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, everybody, we've had enough of it. There's a great group called Free Press by former New York Times opinion writer named Barry Weiss. For my money, as far as U.S. journalism, they do the best job of presenting both sides of every story, as National Public Radio was supposed to do. But if you've read the recent revelations by a guy named Yuri, I can't think of his last name right now, yeah, there's a definite bias at the National Public Radio and most media outlets. We have to demand better, and then we have to defend ourselves through critical thinking training, which looks like this. This shows you that if you use Instagram as center, if what is published and amplified or on Instagram is neutral, this is what TikTok does. It amplifies the current frictions in our country. It amplifies the failures of democracy, political. It amplifies issues that favor its agenda. And on the red side to the left, you see it really squashes and de-emphasizes anything about Taiwan, Uyghurs, South China Sea, Tibet, etc. So if your kids are on TikTok, or if you are, they're getting half the story, and they're being censored. So when people talk about taking TikTok out of our information space as censorship, well, remember the original sin is TikTok is it's a platform for censorship, and we've got to recognize that. I know people have financial interests in TikTok, but you've got to understand this. If you care about nothing else, you should look at the data on what it's doing to America's kids, especially girls. John Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, if you've read anything he's written on this, it's really important work. That social media, and particularly like TikTok, which my friend BJ Schwedo calls digital fentanyl, is addictive and it drives people to self-harm. Let's talk openly about this and fix it. I love this one on the right. You've got a known and proud communist, Hu Xijing, who runs their Communist Party tabloid called Global Times. Look what he says. Speak up now before the U.S. government strips you, the American people, of your constitutional rights of free speech. There's no free speech in China. I mean, again, if you just pause for a minute and you see the irony and the cynicism in this, it's just shocking. Did you know that TikTok in its form in the United States is not allowed in China? It's so radioactive. It's so dangerous that they can't use it. They say they have. ByteDance has a similar algorithm. It's only similar because ByteDance runs it. It's called Douyin, and it's basically one-way transmission of government propaganda to people. TikTok, and once we wake up to the problem, we'll get rid of TikTok and these other things and we'll start fixing it. How do we respond? Well, we insist on reciprocal access to their information environment, and if they won't give it to us, we're going to have to deny them access to ours. We have to look at where they're strong and where they're weak. They're strong geographically on their East Coast, and that's where we're focused, and we shouldn't be. They're very weak on the West side, Xinjiang, Tibet, and all those. I mean, they spend a lot of time and effort keeping those people from breaking off and revolting. And we should look at where they're strong and weak and put our strengths against their weaknesses. And then we have to honestly fix our media environment. Fairness doctrine, I know it was not a popular thing. We can talk about that, but it was very useful. Finally, when the PRC makes threats, we just ignore them because they never follow through on them. But if we react, it's free. Last thing, America's sons and daughters here at the Air Force Academy and elsewhere we go. Frank, you've seen it, Colorado College and UCCS and the rest. They're doing just fine. As we get older, our brains get more and more ossified and fixed, and we won't hear other arguments, and we get very upset if we hear something that we don't like. 18, 20-year-olds here at the Academy are fantastic, and if I point out to them here where, the other side of stories, they're very quick to go, okay, we see this as a complicated issue, and we're not going to decide. I find that it's awesome. Anyway, and then the Institute of Future Conflict here, our job is to stop thinking in terms of fighting the last war, World War II, Vietnam, or Middle East, and start thinking about what's coming. And it's information. That balloon that went over the top of the United States was collecting information on us. And the fact that we shot it down was entirely necessary, perhaps a little late. What we haven't done yet is shown the contents of that payload, which were it was obviously spy gear. We're worried about the relationship. We shouldn't worry about the relationship. They punched us in the face with this balloon. We need to punch them back. So I'm all for reciprocity. I'm all for dealing with a bully the way bullies want to be dealt with. And I'll leave this from the former pilot. That's look on the balloon. That's the shadow of the U-2 on that balloon. That guy's a hero. The guy that took that picture.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That's the closest they get to being fighter pilots in the U-2. I'll stop there. Franks and all. Thank you for the time.
Wow, great. I know how the rest of you guys feel, but I like a round of applause. So if you guys want to unmute and clap, that's fine as well. But I'm always amazed when I talk with Dave. I always learn something new. And in fact, Free Press is something he turned me on to probably more than a year ago, and I do find that it is balanced, right? It presents you just as quickly as you'll see something against the right, you'll see it against the left, and possibly even against the middle, and explain why. So great presentation. I'm sure we have lots of questions. For those of you who would like to go ahead and put anything into the chat. What we're going to do is we'll go ahead and move forward. We'll first check to see if any of the crew members or if our producer out in Portland, who helped us bring in and mix in the hip hop music, will allow him to make a few comments if he's available. ASAP, if that's fine for you, and then we'll turn it over to Dennis, and then we'll get into the panel discussion where we can answer questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat on anything you heard from Dave. And I've got plenty of questions I'm thinking about just as I was listening to this. But thank you, Dave. Excellent presentation. ASAP, are you in a position that you'd like to that you can speak, and you'd like to make any comments, introduce yourself?
Yeah, I definitely will introduce myself. I had not had planned to speak. I really had just come to listen and to absorb and to, do as I always do, learn from you, Frank, and get a better perspective on how the bigger picture is, since I've just kind of been working on just the song. And so I just like to say hi to everyone. I just woke up, so I'm a little rough around the edges. I got a face for radio right now, so I'm just going to keep it like that. But other than that, I just want to let everyone know that I am really in love with the idea, and I'm really grateful, being a young black man, to be able to be part of this. Because how I got wrapped into this is very random. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but before I knew it, I had Frank in the studio with me, and I had Stinga in there with us, and we're now working on a movie. And so pretty much all I got to say is I'm happy to be here. I'm loving the diversity of the panels. I was not expecting such a wide variety of topics, from opera to information security to hip hop. So this is a very interesting and exciting group. So I just want to just say those two pieces. Next time we talk, I'll probably have something more appropriate and more formal to elucidate and to explain my role and stuff like that. But just know that I'm here in the background. I make music. I love making music, and I love this whole story and this whole process. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. No, brilliant. I just sat there and watched him and Stinga B come together. I'm in the studio, and it's just like watching magic happen, right? And for any of you who've been involved with, tough, complex problems, you get a breakthrough, or you have that light bulb moment. That's what it was like watching the two of them work. They're really geniuses. They're masters of the craft, and they just did a wonderful job. And then that music was taken by our trio from Down Under, Marcel, Stewart, and Paul, and they integrated it right into the song. I'd love to share the song with you guys. It's one of those songs that as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be a hit, right? So you'll be hearing more to come on that soon. Okay, first of all, before I turn it over to Dennis, is there anyone else from the crew that may be on a phone that I don't recognize show up? Or is there any Stroud family member or friend that wanted to make any remark before we turn it over to Dennis for the cybersecurity session? Okay, Dennis, it's all yours.
Okay, so go ahead.
Dennis, are you able to hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you guys fine. Yeah,
pretty good.
Screen. Yeah, quick. Screen up. All right, of course I screwed it up. Let me unshare.
You're all good. Like ASAP said, some of us are still waking up.
Yeah. I just hate it when they take the entire screen and it doesn't allow you to change what you need to change. Let me go ahead and start this from the beginning. There we go. Right, let's get started. Hey, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, just want to do a quick sound check. So I put this presentation together for this event, and it's a scaled down version from what I do to most business owners. So when I talk about business owners, you can apply the same thing to individuals. And it's kind of piggybacks on what Dave went through just a few minutes ago.
where about cybersecurity and different things. All right. So about me, I've been doing cybersecurity and IT security all my professional life. I used to have a full head of hair when I started, and now barely have a few follicles. But in any case, what we're going to do today is to go through the landscape and terrain. I use that terminology because that's more on warfare, and it is a war. You've got to understand where you're at in your scenario, and I'll go into details there. I will also talk about trends, what you'll see that is going on in the market and in the realm of cybersecurity, and then some cybersecurity free resources and things that you can do to protect yourself individually, your business, or your organization. Landscape. There are malicious actors out there, whether or not their goals are to steal wealth via fraud or some sort of attempt to steal your money or steal intellectual property, your secrets, your information, or do some sort of disruption, either your access to information or even, like the election cycle coming up, as Dave said earlier, disrupt your way of life. It really depends on who that actor is, whether or not it's a state-sponsored actor or just a common, cyber criminal or some kid in the basement that's want to prove their prowess of what they can do to someone's system. And there's different methodologies that they use to accomplish those goals. Normally, you may have phishing attacks, which typically they try to impersonate somebody legitimate, and those things are becoming more sophisticated. Years ago, you had the Nigerian scam where they would send these letters to people in the email boxes and with misspellings and things like that. But with AI, these attempts look so legitimate via deep fakes, where they're actually faking images of folks and putting them in that email, or even making that email look like a legitimate source. And the only way you can kind of discern it is there's something different, which could be an email address, it could be a domain name, which looks almost exactly the same. For the casual eye, you won't know what it is. In fact, years ago, as a contractor, when on the second OPM breach, we were putting in some technology to protect OPM. And while just like the second week, we looked at the logs, and there was some call home activity. Call home activity is some system is calling back to another system on the internet via some sort of means, and it was going to a domain name called opmsecurity.org. And that domain name, we looked it up, it was owned by Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America. And we brought that to their attention, and they asked us to leave the room, and we found the other breach, and they looked through all those technologies, to figure out what happened. Case in point is that a lot of these things are not, technical controls won't obviously find it, but the user needs to be aware of things like that are going on in their environment, especially in the email. Ransomware. Oh, ask Change Healthcare about that. And that's been a big news item in the news. They're right up to $1.6 billion to remediate that situation, fixing the problem and the reputational damage and all those type of things. And I use the term left and right of boom. Boom is when ransomware happens. Something happens, they encrypt your data and hold you ransom. And they say, well, you can get your data back if you pay us. And if you pay them, you may not be guaranteed that you're going to get the key to unencrypt your data. Change Healthcare paid the ransom and they still had the problem. And, social engineering is really taken off where it's not just the technical pieces, having a firewall in place, it's not going to protect you. Social engineering is where these systems are using our behaviors of people to take advantage of that situation because people they're trying to trigger you, and people are emotional and they want an emotional response. And once you get that emotional response, you may not think clearly about what you're actually doing. Case in point, there's a common fraud by help desk fraud. The malicious actor will send an email saying they're the help desk of Microsoft, and we notice you have this problem. Please go to this link and log in of some sort. Do something. They engineer and find out the profile of who they're sending to, understanding through social media that they look up your profile and try to figure out whether or not the risk, whether or not you're a high risk person, and then they'll exploit that. And whether or not you have investments or banking with certain institutions, and all of that information is used against you to compel you to take an action. And malware is the way they put the foothold into on your computer or on your system. So that's the landscape in most simplistic terms. That's the landscape. And the reason why I have this image on the right is that you don't want to be the low-hanging fruit, the easy target. I have a colleague that says you don't want to be a pumpkin since they grow on the ground, but I use this here, the apples. You don't want to be the low-hanging fruit where you don't have anything in place, where you're easy target, you don't have things to protect yourself. The trends in 2024. Artificial intelligence is our friend and it's our enemy. The malicious actor is going to use artificial intelligence to gather information, to build those algorithms, and determine the best way to penetrate you individually or some sort of system. And the other trend is supply chain management or vendor management. Most organizations, they have control of their own systems, but with the proliferation of cloud-based applications out there, those systems need to be secure as well. So if, let's say you have an organization, you're making widgets and you need to outsource your accounting system, maybe QuickBooks, or maybe you like some other system that is built for your business, but they don't have the security pieces in place, then your organization is at risk because your data is there, your customers are there, your customer information, whether or not it's the business or individually, whether or not it's your health, if it's a healthcare system, you got access to healthcare records, all of those type of things that come into play. So the supply chain up and down is at risk. So a lot of larger organizations, like let's say you're dealing with a Fortune 1000 or 100 company, they're putting mandates down to their subcontractors to do X, Y, and Z to protect their system so that they can protect their data. So imagine that supply chain can be quite extensive. Your subs have their own subs and they have their own subs, so it's kind of like a daisy chain. The other thing is cyber insurance. a lot of organizations are using cyber insurance to remediate, to help them um, respond to a problem, or and say, okay, we've been hit. We will turn to cyber insurance to recover the losses. Yeah, but the cyber insurance companies are saying, are you have your basic pieces in place? Can you attest to that? And they're also going to require proof that you're doing it as well. Privacy regulations are getting strengthened. If you do business in Europe, you got GDPR. You do business in California, they have their own privacy regulations. And each state is pretty much are adding privacy regulations along with data regulations of how you protect that information. We've kind of gone through ransomware protection. Those are things you can put in place so that you can immediately disable a system that has been hit with ransomware before it spreads throughout the entire organization. Because a lot of the attacks, they get a foothold and they learn the entire network, and they will exploit in moments in multiple systems. So you need something to isolate that as quickly as you can. And the other thing is zero trust. And what that means, that's a term you probably may see in a lot of trade magazines or dealing with cybersecurity. Basically, it means trust nothing, verify every connection. Before you log on to a system, verify you have access to that data, verify that you're on that network. All those things. Don't trust anything implicitly. You need to verify it. And that's even from the user level. So if you get an email and from someone you've never seen before, you don't trust it. Be very, very skeptical. Yeah. And I'm already close up. Is We've been talking about cybersecurity, AI. What are the things that I can do to protect myself about what's going on? The first thing is whether or not you're individual or business, be aware of things that are going on from the malicious actors' point of view. Where are your risks? Train yourself or train your folks on what likely things that may happen dealing with the internet. Ignorance, you really, it's sort of like when you're walking down the street, be aware of your surroundings. And you during daylight, you're aware of certain things, but if you weren't at night, you might get spidey sense of something's not right. Trust that. Trust that with the any type of email coming into the system. Um, Password management. That's a 101 thing. Turn on multi-factor authentication. That's where you have your type in your password. You may get a one-time code that's sent to you via email or some sort of authentication system. Do that as a minimum. There are ways criminals can get around MFA, but there are ways that you can protect yourself even further by putting secure keys and more security around those type of things, and also use a password manager. Don't use simple passwords. Most systems don't allow you to do that anymore, like 1234556 or QWERTY or something like that. Those passwords can be cracked instantly. Um, what else here? Verify everything. I mentioned that with zero trust. It, just like after 9/11, see something, say something, report it. There are tools out there, especially with our federal government. They do this. We're all taxpayers, or they offer this for free to anyone with internet access. And like the CISA's Shields Up program, they have this a wealth of basic information out there about how you can protect yourself, or even what's going on in the world right now. The IC3.gov, this complaint center, they tally all of those complaints and attacks that they're aware of into a great report. If you have any curiosity of what's going on cybersecurity wise, I encourage you download that annual report, and it is very eye opening. Not only the provide the number of incidents, but the wealth that was lost or the cost to that of that incident, and it's not going down every year, and it's going up every year, and they provide that information. So in conclusion, here's my information. If you have any questions, let me know. And back to you, Frank.
Excellent. This is great. I mean, I can't tell you the number of things that this reminded me of as you were going through the presentation. My father, he's lost his Facebook account, right? He almost lost it again for same types of things that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a company reporting directly into the CEO, and apparently they were following him on social media, possibly me too, on LinkedIn. They saw conversations and so forth that took place. I got an email that had to do with something that I thought took place only within our conversations within our company, but there's probably something that was said in the internet that gave them some sort of indication. They sent me an email that sounded just like him, and I almost clicked on it and followed through on it, right? And I'm supposed to be quote unquote sophisticated on this stuff, coming from IBM and Ernst & Young, and it's just amazing how, and this was done with ChatGPT. This clearly was done with ChatGPT because it pulled information about him and me from the LinkedIn. I later followed up with it to see the terminology they used, and it was worded in such a way that it sounded just like his tone of voice, right? He's written a couple of books, so it knows his tone and how he says things, and I almost did it. I double checked, just happened to double check. Yep, that's not his email address, but they used an email address that sounded very close to his name, though, as well.
Yep.
This is great. Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll have some additional questions as we move forward. So at this point, we're going to move into, let me ask for anyone who wants to send a message on chat, that's fine. If you want to unmute or let me know it's possible that maybe you can't unmute and you request it, then I can unmute you. I'm not certain. But at any rate, if you have anything to say, then please go ahead and chime in. What we're going to do is we're going to move to the panel discussion, and we're going to expand the panel. It'll be primarily around our key people that are part of the public speakers for today, but we also like to invite the rest of you who might have questions or have something to say. Okay? Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, so for those of you who may have shown up late, Reina Flor, our four-time Olympic athlete, we have a recording, and we're going to share that with you all when we put up the final video that will be fully integrated. Umar is over in the Middle East for his brother's wedding, and Sibil, normally in New York, is in India right now with her parents. So we recorded all three of them. We'll have the recordings for all of you as well. Okay. And again, this is Reina Flor, and this is Sibil. And so, first of all, Ralph, Mike, Kai, just double check in case any of you may have joined and want to make any comment. Having heard nothing. And by the way, so here's me getting impressed with ASAP and Stinga B, by the way, in the studio in Portland. You can barely make me out in the reflection on the mirror there, on the door there. At any rate, so this is ASAP. And this is our rapper Stinga B. And, you know, I don't know how many of you guys have spent a lot of times in the studios. I've done it a little bit, but it's been a long, long time. And I was amazed at the new technology and things and how this is being done, right? You're literally watching him figure out the beats and everything on a computer. Then Stinga B goes into the other room and does his recording. They go back and forth, and it just is magical when you see how everything comes together. So it was a great experience. Okay. So some of the questions that came up, and we'll pose these to the panelists. as well as open it up to the rest of the floor. And please remember to chime in. Let me ask, is anyone having any problems unmuting? I guess I don't know if in case you need to unmute, just let me know, and I should get something that pops up on my screen here. So just to let you know. One question that came up from college prep students was, we hear a lot of stuff about AI, but is it really creative? And I'm not sure how many of you guys follow what's been happening with this battle for the last several weeks or so with Drake and Kendrick Lamar. But if you get a chance, just do a quick Google search on Lamar and Drake. And what's happened is there are people out there imitating both of them and putting AI battle responses that sound like one of these artists, and people are now confused as to what's real and what's not real. That's how good the music capabilities of AI is today. These are just different images you can see here from Ideogram. And then this is a really interesting image I saw from Midjourney, where they said, okay, take imagine a bulb in a human head form with headphones, with a matching environment in the background, Banksy style, vintage, aspect ratio 2:3, which is 2 across 3 down, and then version 6 of Midjourney, right? And this is what Midjourney came up with, right? And then another one, a magazine-style visualization of a robot human's head in profile, seamlessly tubes, merging scientific exploration with futuristic vision, the aspect ratio, and the amount of stylistic randomness that it generates. And you can see that type of image. So it's just phenomenal. You're seeing, text that before you couldn't read text, and now you put in Coca-Cola, you put in, this is Feliz Dia de Mais, looks like happy birthday, right? And now the text is actually showing up. In many cases, it's spelled correctly, not always, but so those are some of the things. So I will ask that question of the panelists. Whoever wants to chime in, just let me know. Dennis, Dave, and then again, for any of you who want to chime in, we'll allow you to unmute and make any comments as well. So your thoughts, Dennis? Creative, not creative? Is it only creative because of what we're doing?
Well, it's only creative in the sense to what the information you put into the system and what information it has access to. So if it doesn't know the artist that you're trying to emulate, there's nothing. It's not going to come up with anything. Your output may be suspect, but if it knows about it, common information, has access to the information to build that profile, then yeah, it can put a lot of different things together according to that algorithm. But that is why, when you do AI against medical diagnosis, it only has information. It's not going to be creative. You got to feed it. So if your information is good, it can do some good things. If it's not, there are holes that you don't know what you're going to get.
Right. Yeah. Dave, anything to add?
From the Chinese perspective, it's far better than the system they have, which blocks creative thought of any sort. So it actually is it's beneficial in a system where speaking truth gets you in trouble, and the incentives to be creative are limited. Again, the Chinese people are amazingly creative. The numbers 6 and 4, June 4th. Today's May 4th, by the way. This is a very important day in Chinese revolutionary history when a bunch of students in 1919 tried to overthrow the government. And I think we all remember 1989 on June 4th, the Chinese PLA tanks through with Tiananmen Square and killed a bunch of students. So we're in this month period of extreme sensitivity, whereas if you see the numbers 6 and 4 anywhere online, it will be censored. So what do the Chinese creative internet users do? They start talking about May 35th. I mean, that's just sheer genius.
Oh, wow.
You can't criticize Xi Jinping, but you can talk about Winnie the Pooh, and it's based on a meme from anyway, memes out there. So they are racing around, dodging the censors constantly, but they, in a formal, official sense, have a very hard time being truly creative, which is why they steal American and Western intellectual property. But to Dennis's point, it's better than what they have. And so the government, which is not creative at all, can at least use this to inform itself of opportunities. And those opportunities are mostly politically untenable. Over.
Right. Excellent. Thanks for the comments on that question. I'll say that, yeah, if you put something creative in, it's just phenomenal what you can get out of this thing. And you can play around with it to fine tune it and get it better and better in terms of images. I've used it for audio, use it for video. Use it audio and images and text. The things I can do with my book, the way I can feed it both of my books as PDF files and then tell it, use all the information, back to your point, Dennis, it has the data. And so it knows all the connections of things I've done and talked about in the book. It can put it together in really creative ways because it has access to something that it can draw upon. So, okay. Next question: how can AI unify rather than divide us? It looks like that's my typo. Obviously, one of the big questions that we're talking about with regards to today's theme. So, Dennis, Dave, I'll let either of you, whoever wants to chime in first. Some of my thinking on this, I know part of what some of the kids were curious about is whether it's like democracy, protests, generational, even against their parents, questions around if I'm in, kind of a traditionally disadvantaged community, how can I level the playing field? So that's kind of the context of some of the questions that were related to this one.
I don't think my opinion on it is that young people have access to more information. I was just thinking about myself at that same age. Is like the way I learned was going to an encyclopedia. Through when I was in junior high and high school, that was the first source of information. And then as I got a little bit older, going to the library and grabbing microfiche and looking through newspaper articles and all that type of stuff. Now that information is at everyone's fingertips, from the keyboard out to the internet. And now what AI has done is a way to curate that information even further, where you're not reading every article. So if that algorithm that goes out and does those sources that information and has access to that data, and it's clean, and you know that it is what you're getting is truth, then this can revolutionize what people are consuming. So in that regard, yes. Yeah, but if the information is bad, yeah, it's like, okay, people starting believing that the sky is green and trees are blue, then it will divide us.
Question, but just to kind of follow up to that, Dennis, how many of you are familiar with Perplexity? If you guys are on the chat, you are familiar with it, say yes, let us know. Have you used Perplexity, Dennis?
No, I haven't used it, no.
Okay. So it's a chat. It's a new way of thinking about search and chat, right? But essentially what it does is it curates all the crap out of Google stuff and cleans it up, puts evidence, shows sources. So as I started first playing around with that tool, I was just amazed at how well, because I would ask it, controversial things or things that could be a little bit, not necessarily black and white. And the amount of research I would get back to defend or, refute a particular point is the best I've seen of all the chat engines out there, as an example. So I can see where that could possibly be unifying. I'll start over you, Dave.
Yeah, so two things. This is a great conversation, by the way. Frank, type in, where did the COVID pandemic start? And tell me, not now, but tell me what you find out. I don't think Perplexity can get the right answer because there's so much disinformation on it.
Yeah, right.
We all know from the classified record, I was at State Department, I owned the China portfolio at that time. I can tell you 100% start of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the scientists are finally coming clean, thinking now they won't be prosecuted for this. But I had a cadet do research on this for a presentation in the Chinese language class, and he was 100% convinced that it came out of the wet market, where there are no pangolins, civets, or any intermediate hosts. The whole wet market thing is a complete fabrication by the Chinese party to avoid being blamed and then sued for allowing the pandemic to poison the world. Dennis, to your last point, it's a fantastic one, is the internet and social media encourage creative thinking, not critical thinking. They encourage creative thinking. And creative thinking is divergent. That's the whole point of creative thinking, is to come up with something maybe we haven't thought about. And then from there, maybe pursue opportunities. But what it's done in our societies, it's actually created this massive split and sub-splits. You pick a topic and there's going to be uninformed argumentation. And so this is where critical thinking is convergent. What you do in critical thinking is you find out first off, you establish known facts, and then you look at assumptions. You take those assumptions apart. From there, then you start, with an open mind, start looking what the options are. So creative thinking is great. It's what makes us wonderful. And then, Dennis, to your point, I think you can use AI to do what Frank's doing right now with search engines to at least filter the obvious junk out, right? But you got to be careful, because I can show you many examples of fact checkers who got it completely wrong, but they claim, nope, we do all the work. We're totally objective. I have yet to see a real, truly objective fact checker.
So to your point, Dave, right? So it does not say it comes out of the wet market, right? It makes it very clear. The exact origins still remain a subject of intense investigation and debate.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. At least they're leaving it open to question.
But I agree. I don't think any other chatbot would say this, though.
Yeah, the overwhelming evidence is it came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Right. Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Next question here. Will AI take my job, or will it make new jobs for all of us? And if so, what skills should I look to develop? So I'll throw one out just to kind of get us started, because it's something that, I've been having a lot of conversations with my daughter about, 13-year-old, ready to turn 14 next month. And we talk a lot about the importance of adaptability and resilience, probably more than anything else, right? I think you're making a point earlier, Dave, about the data that John Haidt and others are seeing around self-harm and suicide rates and so forth of young women, young girls. I think mostly a lot of it from 10 to 20 range, something like that, teens, associated with social media. But for exactly those types of reasons, we had a lot of conversation with her when she made the transition coming out of gymnastics and ultimately decided to go into volleyball. That was very stressful, and she was used to getting all of these accolades because she's a top gymnast and all of her videos, and everybody goes crazy over it and likes it. And then all of a sudden she's moving away from it, right? And I can only imagine the type of negative reaction she got in certain circles from that, as an example. So anyway, why don't you go first, then Dave? We'll turn it over to you, Dennis. Will AI take my job, make new jobs, and if so, what skills should I develop?
You know where I'm going with this one, because I don't know anything. I am not a techie. I'm a international relations guy. But here's an idea. You see those robots standing behind that guy? The PRC has a massive demographic problem, where the one-child policy has turned the population pyramid upside down. So who's going to do all those jobs? As China is a center of manufacturing and has to continue that, is they've really gone into robotics. Does AI and robotics work together? I think they do.
Yes.
This is probably going to be the future, as people don't want to do the hard work anymore, the work that can be outsourced to machines and other things. But let me go to education again. My brother was not a good student. He hated high school, and he eventually bailed on high school at 10th grade. But in Los Angeles, where I grew up, they had vocational schools, and my brother loved to bend wrenches. He was a great mechanic, so he went to motorcycle repair school as a vocational option. Germany does this really well, by the way.
Yes.
You bifurcate early on into where your strengths and interests lie, and there's no derogatory sense of being blue collar or white collar. I think we have to get back to that. And what that's going to take us away from is this increasingly laptop class activity where basically all everybody does is plug in their computer and type, and we'll get back to actually making things in this country, which will reestablish a middle class, an honest middle class, and I think will resolve a number of major problems we're having that are economically based. So yes, there will be baby jobs. It'll create opportunities for people who get this stuff, but we have to consciously, through legislation and other things, create other opportunities in this country where just because you're not, you know, intellectually stimulated, there's a lot of other work to do. I'm a general, my stepfather was a general contractor, and he taught me how to build houses. I tell you, there's nothing more rewarding than blue collar work, than getting out there and building something and doing something you can point to and go, I did that. So we need to expand our thoughts on those things.
Here, love it. Dennis, and by the way, once Dennis goes, Joe, feel free, Trudy, if you'd like to chime in as well. All yours, Dennis.
Yeah, it depends, but mostly the jobs will change where you can do more with less. I'm just thinking, from, just editing a document, has changed in the last 30, 40 years. We've gone from, manual markup and using whiteout to edit documents to having spell checkers built into applications to where we are now, where we're using, AI to help outline your documents and putting things into a common format. So you're able to do more with less, and being able to train people to do other things. People are good at thinking. AI is just gathering things into a structured format. So give me more documents that I can read that's already been formatted. I don't have to worry about the spelling. I can review it quicker. It's out the door.
Right.
So jobs will change.
Excellent, thank you. So one of the things that, probably about 6-8 months ago, response to this was AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will. Right?
Yep.
And no doubt about it, the things I've been able to do in Umer's video where he talks about before he had to rely upon 5 or 6 other techies to help him roll out a full website and all the coding and all the web forms and all the online calculators and all these things. He can now do it. And he gave one example for certain types of coding that had to be done for this financial calculator loan company somewhere in Australia. Would have taken him 3 days. He was able to do it literally in a matter of minutes using ChatGPT and feeding it the right information. Now, he's smart enough to know how to ask the question, right? So he's got to ask the right question in the right way, but he was amazed at how well it worked. The customer was very happy. Trudy, Joe?
Hey, this is Joe. Sorry, I'm having trouble doing comments from my device, but fantastic stuff from both David and Dennis. One thought I have about AI and benefiting the youth, and I think it was Dennis's points about how information is so much more easily accessible. I do think a Perplexity or a Claude that has a functionality of sifting through bullshit it's got to be coming, but I think it has to be democratized. I mean, just like we focused on driving high-speed internet into rural places and underprivileged communities, I think making those sort of apps available, Claude Pro or whatever I would subscribe to, same with Perplexity, if those are available to students as a right, I do think that's a huge opportunity to leverage and enable. Thanks.
folks. So again, we're talking high school students and first year college students asking these types of questions.
I think we kind of answered that earlier, because people are using AI to do their jobs. There are courses now, like technical writing. There are courses for how to use AI to do technical writing. So if you're going in that direction, become a technical writer, I think I would learn AI to be a technical writer rather than the regular technical writer. You may want to learn the fundamentals, but use of AI will probably give you the competitive advantage.
No, I agree with that for sure. So for those of you who don't use and do a lot of prompt engineering, one way that's done is you give the prompt in the persona of, right, a technical writer. And if you happen to know a name or two of really good technical writers, you feed that to the AI, and that's how it works. By the way, just as an aside, because I know we probably do have some folks I'm looking at, even some of the family members and so forth. In terms of, this large language model, it's like an autocomplete on steroids, right? If you go to Google and you start typing in something and it autofills, right? Or even some of the Microsoft Word systems and things, so forth, they autofill. And essentially what it does is it's looking at a bag of words. So if you had a bag of words and you pull out, a random, word, and one is red and it's yellow and it's green, you can probably guess that this bag of words, is a category or topic of colors, right? You pull out another one around, names of presidents, you can figure out his presidents. So what it does is it takes these things, it's called vectors, and it takes every word in the human language, right? And it takes almost like a tree, and anything that's canine, dog, wolf, fox, whatever, right? It puts them all close together. So when it goes through and reads things, it knows the probability of another word based upon quickly running up these different trees of these vectors and understanding how to construct a sentence. It reminds me of when I was working with CISM, which is the Olympics for the military and the Air Force, and we were hosting it out at McClellan Air Force Base. And one of the gentlemen was from that was helping us. His name was Rene. He was originally from France, but he spoke 6 languages. He worked at the Monterey Language Institute in California, and he said we were talking about so many different things about translating because we have 13 different countries, and he said, the most difficult thing to do is in real time, as someone's giving a speech, you have to think about what they're going to say next and then translate it into a different language and say it in real time, right? He said that is like one of the most challenging. Now, Dave, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to turn it over to you because I think, when we use AI, the breakthrough was really thinking of how to make it work more like a brain versus trying to do if-then statements and rules, right? So over to you, Dave.
I think the concern, and I think it's a justifiable concern here, is that thinking is hard work. The reason social media works so well is because, as one of my colleagues in the behavioral science world says, it's potato chips. It's easily digested. It takes no mental effort to deal with social media and bad data. Well, if we outsource that hard, thinking, do we run the risk of some sort of, gray matter atrophy or creative thought? If we just outsource creative thought, then where does the creative thought come from? I think Americans, this culture will always encourage people to come up with something new, better, and different, and that's good.
Right.
But I am really worried that college students, really think about it. You can get like an A+ on a paper because you use ChatGPT, because it won't have grammatical errors or spelling errors. It's going to ring true, but it's going to be a complete, problem with basically stealing other people's ideas and not your own. So how do you deal with it? We're working through that here. There's software to identify AI-generated papers and stuff like that, but you got massive plagiarism problems, people taking credit for other things.
Excellent point. And that kind of just hits the last question here. How will AI change education and lifelong learning? I think you truly kind of hit on that topic a moment ago. I know, Dennis, at different points you have been, Dave as well. Anyone from the audience want to chime in with anything? Do we have any teachers or out there?
Hey, it's Joe again. If I could just build on Dave's best point about gray matter atrophy, I think that's a really great point. I think, though, again, I go back to like, I use Claude and Perplexity every day, multiple times as I'm learning a new piece of my industry. And it's spectacularly helpful. So at least it makes me efficient. And so ostensibly that gives me more time to be creative. Although I don't use AI for creative purposes, so maybe I'm missing this point a little bit. But I think we need to be very intentional, rather than battling and trying to keep AI out. I think a kid writing an A+ paper using AI should be viewed sort of as an accomplishment.
Right.
But then the question,
What's the purpose of education, right?
right. Yeah, you make it. Yeah, you want to make the kid fluent in AI and productive in AI. But the question is, how do we be intentional about ensuring we're also cultivating the gray matter? I think it's a really interesting point.
True. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I'm all about imagery. I'm a pretty dim bulb. The movie Wall-E, if you've ever seen that movie, they're all on orbit at zero gravity with a big, 44-ounce Slurpee in their hand. And just like they're not using their physical being, they're not using their mental being either. Again, that's a dystopic or a dystopian view, but I still think we should be militating against it.
Fair enough. And on that, Dennis, Dave, anyone have any parting remarks? Well, listen, thanks everyone for your time. Dennis, Dave, thanks for being gracious and sharing with us a lot of the ideas around cybersecurity. I obviously talk with Dave a lot, and I try to stay on top of some of these things, but some of the things he talked about today, or at least 5 or 6 things, I went, wow, I got to write this down and look it up, find out more about it. So thanks for sharing with us some of the challenges that we face with China, with PRC, right? That's another thing I heard. China, with the Chinese government. And I'm reminded of famous poem on time. Time is the raw material, everything. With it, nothing is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. So for all of you, thank you very much for spending a little time with us. We'll make sure that we'll send the links with all the information out to you. And what I'll also include some kind of basic things that we've done with several companies around artificial intelligence, how I'm using it and we're using it in some of our parts of the family associated with the Stroud events and projects. Specifically, the documentary, The Opera, it is helping and supporting us with imagery, storyboards, and all those sorts of things. So again, thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks,
Frank.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice seeing you, Dave.